What's going on, guys? This is Rob. If you guys enjoy my content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that little bell so you never miss out on my sexy voice. Okay, so getting back into two powerful from Marvel movies, and this one we're covering Hyperstorm. Well, at least one version of Hyperstorm. There's two versions of Hyperstorm. There's David Richards, and then there's Jonathan Richards. Jonathan Richards is the one that's most well known, but I think David is the one that's the most powerful. So David Richards comes out of, it's like Earth 2600 or something like that, and it's basically where Operation Zero Tolerance never ended. So wind the clock back to like 1995, 1996, right? Like Marvel's like, okay, so we're gonna do the Onslaught saga because we're basically gonna do a soft reboot, and we're going to reboot the Fantastic Four and the Avengers because nothing is selling but the X-Men and Spider-Man. But with the Onslaught saga coming to an end, what this did is this initiated Operation Zero Tolerance. And the reason why was because with the aftermath of Onslaught and the threat that he posed, humanity was kind of like restarted humanity's hatred for mutant kind, right? Because they were like, okay, so Onslaught was basically the amalgamation of like Magneto and Xavier's minds merged into one, and then like tried to destroy everything. And so we're not okay with mutants anymore. And so because of that, like it was trying to recapture like the Chris Claremont era of like mutant hatred, so like God loves, man kills, and you know, Project Wide Awake and all that kind of stuff, which it kind of worked. But what ended up happening here is Marvel basically created a character named Bastion. Really, it was Mark Waid and Andy Kubert, I think. They created a character called Bastion. Now, Bastion was a character who was like years in the making, right? So like you go back to Uncanny X-Men 141 and 142, and you get Days of Future Past, and then we had Days of Future Present. And what Days of Future Present revealed is that in the future of the Days of Future Past timeline, the Sentinels were going to create Nimrod, who was like this perfect Sentinel that could like basically adapt to the powers of others and all kinds of crazy stuff. So Nimrod ended up in the present day. Now, in addition to Nimrod, what you also had in the present day that was really a byproduct of like Stephen Lang's Sentinel program and a handful of other things was Master Mold. And Master Mold was basically like this giant Sentinel making machine. What ended up happening is Nimrod merged with Master Mold. And when that happened, it created Bastion. Now, coming out of that, Bastion's goal was to eliminate mutant kind. And so after the events of the Onslaught saga, Bastion had sat down and said, okay, so what we want to do here is we want to implement a plan called Operation Zero Tolerance that was basically spearheaded by Bastion, but was supported politically by Senator Robert Kelly. And this came out of the assassination of Graydon Creed, which was basically like this guy who was just staunchly anti-mutant, so on and so forth. The result was that after the assassination of Graydon Creed, which seemed to have been done by a mutant, this gave Bastion all the approval he needed from Senator Robert Kelly to initiate Zero Tolerance. And Zero Tolerance was Bastion creating like these prime sentinels, like these uber sentinels basically. And that led into really like an attempt by Bastion to capture a bunch of the X-Men, and for the most part he almost succeeded, and it was kind of crazy. Ultimately he was defeated. They ended up forcing him through the Siege Perilous, which was this device that was given to the X-Men by Roma, the guardian of the Omniverse, more or less, and those who passed through it get their lives started over again, right? So like during Fall of Mutants, for those of you guys who have heard that story, that was an event where the X-Men actually passed through the Siege Perilous, and then everybody believed they were dead, and they kind of got a chance to start their lives over. It was weird. Anyway, the idea behind this was that following the defeat of Bastion, Operation Zero Tolerance was officially defeated, and so on and so forth. In the alternate reality Earth 2600, Bastion never lost. And so the events of Operation Zero Tolerance reached their totality when the Prime Sentinels basically conquered the world. And so in this alternate reality, Franklin Richards and I think Rachel Summers had a son named David. And David was crazy powerful, but we didn't originally know. Instead, what we did is we picked up with the Exiles. And the Exiles were basically a group that existed back in like the mid to late 1990s and the early 2000s. And they were essentially like an alternate universe hopping team, right? So it's like the multiversal Avengers, except just not as cool. And so the idea behind this is that they would travel from like reality to reality, and they would like face off against these different threats that were given to them by the Talus, kind of like this entity that would essentially tell them like, hey, a bad thing's happening there, you should go stop it. And like, that's what they would do. That was the basis behind their story. Anyway, they're basically tasked with traveling to this alternate reality where the Sentinels had conquered everything and picking up like David along with a handful of others and like rescuing them. Well, shortly after this happens, the Exiles are told like, you have to kill David. And they're not sure why, like they're not initially sure why, but then they're basically told that in this future, David will essentially conquer reality. And the reason why is because of the power David possesses. So as the son of Franklin Richards, David has all of Franklin Richards' reality altering powers, right? So it means like he's basically equal to Galactus in power. The guy is virtually God, like for the power that he has. Not only that, he can actually manifest and use the powers of the Phoenix Force without actually possessing the Phoenix Force itself, right? So like he can just become the Phoenix, like out of nowhere. But the coolest, this is probably the coolest display of power that David has, the coolest power David has. David has the ability to copy the powers of anyone he's aware of who has powers, right? So like he can be aware that Wolverine has a healing factor and then duplicate Wolverine's healing factor. Like he can be aware of like Cable's telepathy and telekinesis and then just duplicate that. Not only that, he can actually push their powers to a higher level than they ever could. And so it's nuts. He doesn't actually have to copy their powers. He doesn't have to like take their powers. He can just be aware that they have them and then use them. And so it's just like, wow. So like no wonder that guy would basically become God. So it's like a Swiss Army knife. The guy's like a one-man army. But to me, that's what makes David so cool. Now, one of the things to bear in mind is because of those three aspects of his power he possesses, he basically can do anything he wants to. He can alter reality, meaning he can give himself any superhuman power he wants to, but he can also duplicate the powers of others, and he can use the power of the Phoenix Force, which is the sum total of all life that has ever, currently does, or will ever exist in like the multiverse. So the guy, like, it's insane. Now, that kind of begs the question, what would happen if David Richards fought, face off against like the Living Tribunal? I mean, I don't know. See, I don't think he's like Protege, but see, it seems like he is, because Protege can copy the powers of anybody he sees. But if David is aware of the power of the Living Tribunal, then he can duplicate it. But as far as I'm aware, it's limited to the mutant population. He can't really do anything beyond mutants. Anyway, that was a vision that they basically got, saying like you had to kill David, and of course the story transpired. But you take a character like that and you throw him into the MCU, and it becomes cool. Because the funny thing about this is that if David's power is limited to mutant kind, then there goes his ability to duplicate the powers of anybody, because mutants do not exist in the Marvel Cinematic Universe yet. Now, if they roll them in, or when they roll them in, it depends on how they do it. If they go with the Ultimate Universe origin, then basically they'll say Nick Fury was the original super soldier, Nick Fury escaped, after Nick Fury came Steve Rogers. But between Nick Fury and Steve Rogers, Canada kidnapped James Howlett. They basically wanted to make him a super soldier, then discovered a mutant gene. They synthesized it into a chemical, they spread it across the earth, and then suddenly mutant genes started waking up all over the place, hence we got mutants. Like, the Marvel Cinematic Universe may take that approach, or they may take something a lot more complex and say mutants have always been here and we just didn't know about them, or something along those lines. I don't really know how you inject mutants into the MCU this late by basically saying like everybody, like they've been here the whole time and nobody knew. I mean, my theory on Charles Xavier hiding their existence is a good one. The question is, how do you basically make the case that like mutants have to come out now? Honestly, for the most part, I don't care what they do. They can say mutants showed up because like the genie from Aladdin showed up and he was like, hey, so like mutants, and like that's it. Like I wouldn't care. Like it could be the Disney genie, like looking all beautiful and blue and just up here and just be like genie of the lamp, and then like mutant kind is here now. Like I'd be okay with that. I would not have a problem with that. That'd be awesome. If I'm being honest, some bald guy, like some middle-aged bald professor who's like never succeeded in his life is like, hey Genie, I wish I had telepathic powers and I wish there were other people like me. And the Genie's like, done, mutant population. I'd be okay with that. Anyway, so if the mutant population doesn't exist, there goes that part of David's powers. But that still leaves him with the reality warping powers of Franklin, and it still leaves him with the ability to manifest the Phoenix Force. The issue here is that that's a potential future version of David. So we don't know if that version would actually come to fruition. The version that we saw that the Exile spent the most time with was a kid. So it was like Hope Summers before Hope Summers. We don't really know like if that's what he was going to become. It was just a fear that he would. And so if we did get that version of him, well then yeah, he would crush the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mean, like nobody would really be able to stand against him. The only people that I could think that could stand against that version of David, because being equal to Galactus is not the same as being all powerful. David's not like the Molecule Man Owen Reese, or like the Beyonders, or even Protege, or like any of those guys who have insane reality warping powers, right? He's not on that level. You'd be dealing with a character who was essentially on par with Galactus. And Galactus has been defeated on several occasions. Like he was defeated in a solo series, or in the Thanos solo series by Thanos. He's died on more than one occasion, or just been defeated on more than one occasion. So somebody with like the Infinity Gauntlet could probably beat David. Now it depends, like the Infinity Gauntlet in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, for all intents and purposes, does not appear to be like the Infinity Gauntlet in the comics. But the difference here is we've only ever seen Thanos use it to snap half the life in the universe out of existence, and then we've seen the individual Infinity Stones used on their own. But we haven't really seen Thanos do anything with the Infinity Gauntlet outside of destroying half the life of the universe. So we don't really know the full power of it in the MCU. If the Infinity Gauntlet in the movies really is on par with the comics, then like that's your key to defeating David. That you would need a power of that scale. Either that, or Doctor Strange goes to like the Dark Dimension and just unleashes Dormammu onto the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and then Dormammu at like full strength could probably take out David. But again, like he's not unstoppable, right? Like he's not totally unbeatable. He's a character with some caveats, and even then, like there's no guarantee he would know how to use his powers completely. I mean, the future vision of himself indicated he did, but again, like along the way, we don't know exactly how all that stuff would manifest. But I'm kind of curious. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace.